Thank you, Mr. Jennings. Good afternoon, everybody. Hope everyone's enjoying this weather, the light show and the sound show we had last night, and then also the beautiful sunshine today. Are you a junkie? Not the typical question we ask at church. Are you a junkie? Or are you a dropout? Are you a junkie or a dropout? Now, in this case, I'm not talking about drug usage. I'm not talking about educational status. What I am talking about is watching news. Watching, in this case, news that affects your life. So what I'm going to be speaking about today is watching news so that you may be accounted worthy. Now, there's so many places to get news. Newspapers, magazines, you can count them by the thousands. As far as news aggregators, which combine articles from different sites, well, those sites, you can list even those by the dozens. You may have Flipboard, Pulse, Reddit, Readability, Instapaper, Reader, Feedly, StumbleUpon, Tap2, and Zite. Where do you go? Where do you have the time? There's websites, there's apps, there's social media, there's networks, there's cable, 24-hour cable news, there's magazines, there's radio, and there's newspapers. Newspapers, well, Fox News itself puts 1,000 stories online per day. How much of that can you read? How much of that should you read or go through? The New York Times puts 700 articles on its site every day, in addition to 600 images, 14 slideshows, and 50 videos daily. If we go to blogs, then the numbers explode from there. The last numbers as far as blogs were from November of 2013. There were 152 million blogs. It was expected to double. That means 300 million, 2014. That it was supposed to double again in 2015. That means by the end of this year, 600 million blogs. We're assaulted by news, deluged by news. Where do you go? What do you do? Well, how do we watch yet redeem the time? Are there keys to watch? Are there areas to focus on, and are there best sources to watch? Let's take a look at that today. Now, first and foremost, when we talk in the Bible about watching, the primary goal, the primary meaning of that is to watch your own spiritual life. There is no doubt about that. But let's take a look at how people watch news, because Americans are, quite frankly, addicted. They're news junkies. They get it everywhere. And this is from a source from the American Press Institute. You can see this. This came out in March 2014, stating exactly where Americans get their news. You can see this. For the most part, believe it or not, still television. Most people get their news television. Laptops, radio, newspapers. Still, well over 60% of Americans use newspapers to be able to get news each week. Cell phones, and then obviously tablets as well. So you can see the influence of the computer generation. You can see it, but people are looking and watching news. Next slide will show us who's watching it. We can see it, news interest by age, different categories, 18 to 29, all the way up to 60 and older. And you can see what people are interested in. And the statistical differences for some people, you can see it. You can see the older you get, they're more interested in traffic and weather. I'll let that one stay on its own. They're also interested in national and international politics, which is a statistical difference, okay? So as you get older, that's something that people are more interested in. Next message, next slide. You can also tell there's a difference by gender. When you look at men and women, there's a difference, especially in certain categories. Women tend to be interested more so than men, statistically, in health and medicine, also schools and education, lifestyle topics. Men, foreign or international news. So, we all have our interests. This also plays a role into how we preach the gospel. How do we attract people? Whether we're attracting men more than women with some of our messages, whether we're attracting more older as opposed to skewing younger. They all play a role. The question is, just because people like traffic and weather, is that news that is important to us? Just because they may like social issues or sports, news, weather, and sports, what is that to us? What should we be watching? The key is we're supposed to be watching the news that has prophetic significance. News that has prophetic significance. So let's take a couple keys as far as why we watch current events. Why watch them? First one is pretty simple. God tells us to watch. Luke 21, verse 36. Watch, therefore, and pray always. Obviously, there's the significance to doing that in our own spiritual life, but we're supposed to be watching what's going on around us, not be clueless to the world and Satan's devices. So that's one of the first reasons why we watch current events. Next, it's meant to motivate and to inspire us. Luke 17:26, it says, as it was in the days of Noah, so it will be in the days of the Son of Man. They ate, they drank, they were given in marriage. There are a lot of people that think, hey, this time is no different than it's ever been. But we have to know that it's different. In fact, if we were to make the analogy to a race, Mr. Armstrong talked about this being a race. Well, if this was a marathon doesn't end at 26 miles. There's that extra couple hundred yards. And at this point, from what we see in world news, it's very easy to see we're in that last lap, that last couple hundred yards of that marathon. Not time to give up, not time to quit, but keep watching. Next, watching current events reinforces that God's word and his promises are true. Now, this is great for parents to be able to take a look at the news and explain why something happens, because it's Satan's world, as opposed to what will happen when it's God's world. There are lessons by the dozen on a daily basis as far as what's explaining that. Deuteronomy 26, verses 1 and 2. If you diligently obey the voice of your God, these blessings shall come upon you, but if you disobey, all of these curses will come upon you. Blessings and cursings. We can see those from our nation, from various nations. We'll be able to see those when we're watching news. Next, the Bible becomes relevant for today. Genesis 22:17, once again, it talks to blessing, I will bless you, and your descendants shall possess the gates of their enemies. Well, we can talk about the gates of your enemies as we talk about the blessings to Israel, but we can see how they've come and how they've gone. It's relevant to today because we can actually show that and teach that. Look what's happened. We can see it has nothing to do with times that are 1,500 years old, 1,000 years old. It's relevant for today. Next, we can discern where many people will be fooled. Matthew 24:5. For many will come in my name, saying, I am the Christ, and will deceive many. Remember, when Christ was saying these words, he wasn't speaking just to the world. He was speaking to the church. Kind of sad to think that many will be deceived. Well, if we're doing our own part and we're watching what's going on around us, that's part of not being deceived. And we can see that. Take heed that no one deceives you. It's vital to our lives. And then next, God's ministry is not immortal. Yet. Will they be? Yes, but not yet. Philippians 2:12, we're told to work out our own salvation. We can't rely on just the ministry to be able to teach us what's going on in the world and how it relates to the Bible. We have to be doing that on our own. Okay? We've gone through generations of the ministry. We've gone through and watched as evangelists came and went. They died. That's natural. We have to be working out our own salvation. So there's a number of reasons why we don't watch world news, though, world events. First of all, we're just assaulted by the sheer amount of news. We talked about that in the introduction. There's just so much. It wasn't that way always. When my father was tasked by Mr. Armstrong to start the News Bureau in the middle 1950s, there were far fewer sites of news to go to. And at one point, we got up to about a dozen people in the News Bureau working for the editorial services department of the church. About a dozen people, and we watched and read and took about 200 different sources. And we collated those, we cut out articles, we worked with the writers for the magazines, specifically for both of Mr. Herbert W. Armstrong as well as Garner Ted Armstrong, because at that time there was a daily news broadcast, and Garner Ted Armstrong wanted to be able to have news every day that led into the broadcast. But you know what? People couldn't have all that news at that time. There was a cost issue. Couldn't get it. People were thrilled when they could come through. Now, it's gone the exact opposite. There's so much you can't take it all. You can barely scratch the surface on how much news there is. So as a result, that leads into the next reason why people don't watch. There's just not enough time. How many people have extra time in their day? I don't. You don't. No one has extra time in their day. So we have to be able to redeem the time, take advantage of it, make sure we're doing what we need to do. Watch it carefully. Next, Yahoo, Google, Wikipedia. People say, you know what, I don't need to watch the news, because if I need anything, boom, I'll just break out the phone, look it up real quick, I got the latest. That plus Yahoo and Google, which are just kind of generic, bring us the latest blow in an event, they don't give you any kind of depth. But that's what people look for news these days. In fact, when you look at the websites, Yahoo has 175 million unique visitors every month. Google has 150 million visitors unique every month. Top 2 news sources. But they don't answer the questions that are vital to us. Next, limited attention span. This has become common to everyone. In fact, from the National Center of Biotechnology Information, in a little over a decade, the attention span of an average human has now dropped from 12 seconds down to 8 seconds as of 2013. Average attention span, 8 seconds. That is 1 second less than a goldfish. So maybe we should not be asking who's smarter than a 5th grader. We should be asking who has an attention span longer than a goldfish. That's something else we fight against. We have limited attention spans. Next, we don't even know where to start. Once again, that amount of news, where do you start? We're going to give you a couple keys to that. Once again, one other kind of reason, that's what the ministry's for. Well, the ministry's busy. We think we're busy. The ministry's got a number of congregations to serve, a number of different options. They've got a lot of things too. They do try and do their part in serving. But once again, the responsibility is ours to watch. So how do we watch? Let's take a look at that. How to watch world events. First of all, be familiar with current events. Important current events. Now, there's going to be one-off situations of things that happen around our geography, our nation, our world. They may be unique events. What we want to look for in specific is trends, patterns, things that are happening. You're seeing this time and time again, different than what it's been before. And that's what we want to look for, is trends, not isolated events. Next, we want to develop a comprehension of history. Do we all need to be doctorates in history? No, we don't have to have that, but we should have a basic comprehension of history, because the news cannot be divorced from the past. Okay? What happens today is always related to what happened last year, maybe 10 years ago, 100 years ago, especially when it comes to international events. So we should have some understanding of history. Next, we need to avoid time wasters. Avoid time wasters. One of the biggest time wasters you have out there is local news. Now, not that I don't watch local news. I want to see what the weather's tomorrow, find out what to wear, whether I need to bring an umbrella. But local news is not meant to give any kind of real depth. What it does is it's a profit center for the local stations. The programs, the lead story, less than 2 minutes long. And after that, the average story on a 22-minute news program is 27 seconds. What can you really share in 27 seconds? Virtually nothing. So avoid time wasters. Next, focus on the meanings and the why analysis. Focus on the meanings and the why analysis rather than the minute details. We want to avoid just the blow-by-blow, this happened today or that happened yesterday. That doesn't matter. Don't focus on the trees, focus on the forest. Okay? And so what we want to do is we want to focus on why. Now, one thing we don't want to get stuck in is when we look at news, we're not focused on the who. We don't have to focus on who's going to be the beast. Who is going to be the false prophet? Is this the one? We don't need to know that. That's not our focus at this time. Do we want to watch certain things? We want to watch to understand the how and the why. How did these things come about? What's led behind them? What's the background? Why is it happening? Because sometime we're also going to be called into question as far as to explain these. Next, study geography and become familiar with world leaders. Now, there's a handout I'd like the ushers to pass out, and it should be enough for all the adults at least. So take a look at this. On this, I'll get to the front page of the handout in a little bit, but on the back, there's a bit of a questionnaire. It's something we've gone through. We've done it at Foundation Institute. This is something that's been done many times before. What do you know as far as who's in charge of various countries, world leaders? Because if you don't know the who sometimes, as far as what's going on, it's hard to follow events, okay? It'd be like trying to follow the Bible, but you don't know who Jesus Christ was. You don't know who Paul, David, Abraham. So you need to at least know who some of these people are. That will help explain the events to some degree as they come about. Next, learn the basic beliefs of the major religions and the political philosophies. Once again, you don't need to become an expert in these things, but you know what? We should be familiar to some degree with what is communism. It's an ism or a belief or thought, teaching that's affected untold millions, if not billions of people over the last decades. Should we know socialism? Yeah, we should know at least a little bit of the basic tenets of socialism. And we should be able to, given all that we see in the news, we should understand a little bit about even the various religions. What are the differences between some of the different beliefs that nominal Christians have? Or what about the Middle East? The differences between Shiites and Sunnis. They're fighting every day, dying every day. And someday, you might be given the task of teaching both a bunch of Shiites and Sunnis. And you're going to have to start teaching them. It'd be helpful to be able to know a little bit about what they had learned in their lifetime, so you can start teaching the correct way of God. Next, you know the best sources of the news. Now, if you see the handout that I gave, the first one is called World Insight, News You Can Use. Okay, so in this one, a lot of times speakers say, I'll give you some things you can use. Well, in this one, I'm going to give you a quarter, a dime, and a couple of nickels. And the way I say that is, I'm going to give you a quarter. 25 insightful columnists. Take a look at these authors. Okay, these are men. They don't have God's Holy Spirit. Sometimes they get involved in sometimes in political issues, but for the most part, they dive into issues. They explain the why, the background, the history of why things are happening, and they'll give you an understanding. 10 sources to review. 10 sources. There's so many out there. Let's cut them down a little bit. Now, once again, this list is not exhaustive. It's a kind of a basic primer to be able to get you started, okay? Right there, we start off with the Wall Street Journal, and I'll come back to that in a minute. We also talk about the Drudge Report. Are there things negative about some of these things? Yes, but they can provide a background. Drudge Report's interesting because it's a news aggregator, meaning it pulls in different articles from different sources. And on the left-hand side of that source, it also lists links to be able to get to perhaps several dozen, if not a couple hundred different other sources. So you can get to sources from Jerusalem to Moscow, all around the world. It'll be a good way to link into other things. 15 books for greater understanding. A couple of them are historical. Some have an understanding on different subjects. Once again, newspapers can be of value, but books can be your best source. Once again, to be able to explain the background, the why. Go deeper on things, okay? Just like with Bible study, we don't just read something. We want to study it. We want to understand it. We want to have some depth. And books are a good way to be able to do that. Here's some good ones to start with. And on the bottom, I got a nickel, or 5 recent articles of value. And I've given the links to those. Take a look at these. There's some good articles there that can provide a little bit more understanding than what we may be getting in the news. And I guarantee you there are a lot more than anyone would get in something like a Yahoo or a Google. Okay? So know the sources, best sources of the news. Now the next three keys, we've been through 7, the next 3 keys are keys that we're only going to have in the church on how to watch world events. Next 3, the first one is know the identity of key nations. Know the identity of key nations. We need to know why a small group of people on a cold, wet island on the periphery of Europe was able to rule an empire that spanned the entire globe. Why did that happen? We understand that when we're able to read that. In fact, we have a booklet coming out in the near future, U.S. and B.C., that'll explain that, teach people. And these are vital issues because our world's changing. It's changing, and it affects how we preach the gospel, too. Once again, there was news that came out the other day that within the next couple decades, Islam is now going to outnumber nominal Christians worldwide. Well, that's going to happen to some degree. We see some of those numbers changing inside even our country as well. And our whole society is changing. There was some information that came out of Barnea Research the other day that talked about attitudes that people in our nation have towards Christianity and their understanding. And it said that 52%, over half, 52% of people feel that Christ was a sinner. Think about that. More than half of people in our nation feel that Christ was a sinner. How do you preach a gospel to people that are, quite frankly, so biblically illiterate they think that Christ sinned? Think about it. It starts changing the more you go through it. Next, as far as how to watch current events, we have to understand human nature. There was the instructor that was used for the international relations class, Hans J. Morgenthau, who wrote a book, Politics Among Nations. And there's a quote here. It's vital to us. He talks about the observer of the world scene cannot find solid ground on which to stand or objective standards of evaluation without the correlation of recent human events with the more distant past and the perennial qualities of human nature underlying both. Here's a man, he was not brought into God's church, but he understood human nature. He understood human nature. That's vital. We see human nature. We see that in scriptures that we see in Romans. We see it in Galatians 5 especially, and at the end of Revelation 12. Vital for us to understand human nature and understand it. And as a result, there's 2 different ways of looking at news. We don't have the time to discuss it in depth, but there's what we would call the realistic school of international relations. And that was what Hans J. Morgenthau would have been the kind of the thought leader on that. Hans J. Morgenthau, realistic school, where they understand that people and nations do things out of self-interest. They understand human nature. People want more. Nations want more. They want power. And they understand that leopards don't change their spots. They are what they are. That's human nature. That's human nature that God has given, that Satan has put into mankind. Then there's another school that goes against the realistic school. It's called the idealistic or the utopian school of international relations, where they believe that human nature is malleable, it's good, just a little bit more science, and we'll all be able to get along. It's utopian. So which way are we in the church? You could say we're a little bit of both. We understand human nature, but then we also understand there will be a utopia going into the future when Christ returns. So you could say we're idealistic realists. But for our purposes today, you would definitely say, given human nature and what goes on in the world scene, we're definitely fall more into the realistic school. We understand what's going on because of that. And the final key to watching current events, and how to watch current events, is to study to understand prophecy. Study to understand prophecy. Now, there's a man that I knew as a father, and he had an interesting quote. He said, "Current events can be deceiving, history misleading, but advanced news foretold in the Bible never fails." Neal Hogberg. Who is that guy? That's my dad, that's right. Prophecy never fails, okay? So some of these men, some of the columnists that I said watch out for, look for their articles, guess what? They're going to make mistakes. God won't. Prophecy doesn't fail. News is not the same thing as truth. It's not the same thing as truth. The Bible is the infallible word of truth that experts reject. The smartest men on the world, and they're in think tanks from Washington to New York, throughout Europe and around the world, they don't understand these basic keys that you and I have been granted. Quite the blessing. And we can see that. We have to be able to look at 2 Peter 1 and see the sure word of prophecy. So next, what do we watch in world events? And we're going to kind of skip through these because I think many of us know these fairly well. What do we watch in world events? First, the decline of the United States and the British Commonwealth. The decline of the United States and the British Commonwealth. We can see that in Leviticus 26. I will break the pride of your power. Something to be able to watch. Jeremiah 30 talks about time of Jacob's trouble. It's just around the corner. We're able to watch it. The Chinese have a saying, may you live in interesting times. It's actually a curse when they say that. We live in quite possibly the most interesting time in the history of humanity. There's so much out there. It's said that the Sunday New York Times has more information in it, one edition of the Sunday New York Times, than all the knowledge that was gained during the entire 1,000-year period of the Dark Ages. What a fascinating time we live in. We need to be able to watch it. Next, watch the rise of the European Union to economic, political, and military supremacy. Every day there's news about what Mrs. Merkel is doing in Germany, what Mr. Putin's doing in Russia. We've got to watch this. It's happening. If things that are just humdrum today had happened 34 years ago, we would have been just unbelievably, I can't believe things are happening. But we've gotten used to it. Watch that. Next, the ascendancy of an assertive and radical Islamic power in an increasingly wealthy and unstable Middle East. We see what's happening. Just this last 2 weeks, we've seen the building of a pan-Arab army. We see Shiites and Sunnis going at each other. We see Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Jordan coalescing and building an army together to be able to fight against ISIS. Unbelievable what this is setting the stage for at some point in the future. Watch it. Be inspired by it. Let it motivate us to spiritual growth. Next, watch for a religious revival, ecumenism, and a powerful leader. We're going to see that. Matthew 24 talks about how many will come in my name, saying, I am the Christ, will deceive many. And we see that in Revelation 13, verse 13, performing great signs and wonders. We have a current pope who's turning the Catholic Church on its ear. Dramatic changes. He likes to make news. Do we know that this man he may have a very short papacy. We don't know, but he's setting some things up that could be dramatic in the future. And he's coming to the United States in September, and no doubt to make some more news some way, somehow here. Next, watch for the increasingly decadent and stridently immoral behavior. Isaiah 3 talks about they declare their sin as Sodom, and they do not hide it. They don't even hide sin. They take pride in their sin. We see that on a very weekly basis. Next, look for disease epidemics. Leviticus 26 talks about that. There'll be terror. Other important world trends to watch. Increasing the impact of travel, information, and communication technologies. It's amazing that we can have drones flying purchases to a house now. These things change. Our world changes on a weekly basis. We have an expanding culture of death, suicide, abortion, and euthanasia. We have the changing roles of men and women, the decline of the family. We've seen in just the last few weeks approval in Europe and a lot of talk here in the United States about having 3 parents biologically. How does God feel about having 3 biological parents? That doesn't even make sense. But remember, God loves family. Satan, who has no gender, hates men, women, and hates family. He'll do anything to destroy family. So that we see that being attacked all the time. Watch that. You'll see wars, rumors of wars, while others declare peace in our time. We'll see rising alcohol, substance abuse, and self-destructive behaviors are considered normal. We'll see children, young people splitting their tongues, getting horns put on, outlandish behavior, hideous, but it's considered cool. It's considered, quite frankly, normal. Massive increases in natural disasters, severe weather changes, widespread drought and famine, increasing lawlessness, deviancy, society devoid of character and values, and a gospel message that has to go to the entire earth. We're going to see a lot of things changing in the near future. Be on the watch out for these. Now, one final thing I'd like to be able to talk about is, where do you go to? You've given us sources, and I said I'd come back to the Wall Street Journal, a couple of items. There's some information that came out of the Pew Research Center in October of last year, and it talked about ideology, and it talked about where do people go for their news. And in this, I'll kind of interpret this, it talks about where do people go for their sources of news. The more conservative you are was on the right-hand side, the more liberal you were on the left-hand side. And it gives different sources. And over on the right-hand side, Rush Limbaugh, The Blaze, Sean Hannity, Glenn Beck, Fox News. And there's kind of a middle ground here. Over on the left-hand side, you had different sources. The New Yorker, you see New York Times, Colbert Report, Daily Show. You see several other things, even The Economist. But what's closest to the middle is kind of interesting. It's the Wall Street Journal. Wall Street Journal. The reason is it's because, quite frankly, in many ways, it's just a pure newspaper. And I would say if you had one source to be able to take that you might spend a little bit of money on, it would be the Wall Street Journal. And when I say a little bit of money, I do mean that. Normally, when you look at getting a subscription to the Wall Street Journal, it usually runs $3 a day, $2 to $3 a day, which can get very pricey. But you can go on the internet. I recently got a subscription to the to the Wall Street Journal for about $7 a month. That's a great price, $7 a month. I mean, you could get lunch at Subway. I know they say $5 footlong, but I mean, you and I both know when you add the drink and add the chips, it's way over $7. I mean, that's what you're going to get for a month of reading this newspaper. And learn how to read a newspaper. There's some articles that you find on the internet, even one by Walter Cronkite, the famous newsman, how to read a newspaper. And he'll explain how, above the fold, which is the fold of a newspaper, you take a look at it, and you'll see the key items. On the Wall Street Journal, it gives you what to watch over on the left-hand side. Usually there's some background articles that have more depth on either side of the key article. Then there's different sections to the Wall Street Journal, including, there's some business items, obviously, some technology, and like so many other newspapers these days that have had a big shift from hard news, international news, they go more towards lifestyle, they go more towards social issues, and we can end up spending our time kind of playing around rather than sometimes what's more important to us, watching key, prophetic, significant events. But one other aspect you might want to watch as far as the Wall Street Journal, their news is good. It's without a whole lot of bias, which is nice. But also then they have the editorial and opinion pages right at the very end, usually the last 4 pages of the front section, where they go into depth by some very skillful writers, those that have a more realistic point of view as far as the world, and they're going to give you the why, the how of why some of these items are important, giving you some history. That's a good opportunity to be able to take a look at the Wall Street Journal and see what's out there. Understand the why, understand the origins, the consequences of actions. That's what we should be looking at. So we can see what's happening not just in individuals' lives, but in the lives of the leaders of nations, as well as how nations interact with each other. So with that being said, hopefully you're able to understand a little bit more of why we watch current events, world news, how we watch world events and current news, and some key sources to be able to do that. And with that, hopefully, along with watching our own spiritual lives, we'll be able to be considered worthy of the future.